The 2+2 meets were supposed to be the big breakthrough after Prime Minister Modi met President Trump in June last year. 2+2 is a meeting between India's Ministers of External Affairs and Defense with their American counterparts. This meet has been difficult to schedule in part because the U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson was sacked and replaced by Mike Pompeo. Well, the meeting has been rescheduled once more with no clear reason why. This comes at a time when the India and U.S. bonhomie seems to have taken a hit with trade tensions simmering. So is there more to this rescheduling than meets the eye? To speak on this, I'm joined by former Ambassador to India Neelam Deo and Michael Kugelman of the Woodrow Wilson Center. Welcome to both of you. Let me start with Ms. Deo and ask about her view, because this is one of those things which could be very speculative. The United States, on the face of it, has said in the same breath that they think the relationship with India is very important, it's a priority. But the fact is that it has been 1 year since these meetings have been scheduled, or there's an attempt to schedule them.
Well, I mean, that's true. It's also added to the mystery that the American PR to the UN is here in India, and she has been telling television channels that there's some good reason and the world will soon know what that reason is without disclosing it. So it's probably just adding to all the speculation around the cancellation. Among the various reasons that could have played into this is the recent announcement that a summit will take place between President Trump and the Russian president. Now, this is really quite significant because Russia and the relationship that the President Trump and his campaign management is supposed to have had with the Russian state has been the subject of a 1 year long investigation by Robert Mueller, by the FBI. It has also been the subject of several committees in the Congress. All in all, it's been a very fragile and complicated statement. So it could be that a lot of attention needs to be paid to that. However, it is John Bolton who has gone to the National Security Advisor, who's in Moscow setting up the meeting, not Mike Pompeo, who actually had been the point person for the meetings with the North Korean leader and the whole denuclearization issue in that relationship.
Mr. Kugelman, you have been expressing your views on this over the last 12 odd hours, and some very clear and strong words there when you tweeted out saying that if the USG really did postpone the 2+2 meet so that Pompeo can attend the Russia summit, then it makes for some really bad optics for US-India relations. You know, there has been a lot of commentary on where the US-India relation has really been going since its highs last year. Do you think it has been meandering a bit?
Yes, absolutely. I think it is meandering, and I would argue that it's taken a pretty significant tumble. The U.S.-India relationship may have taken a bigger tumble in recent weeks than at any time since perhaps the Khobragade affair several years ago, when that Indian consular official in New York was briefly arrested. I think it's interesting that the Trump administration clearly wants to make the U.S.-India partnership work. And I think that over the first few months that the Trump administration was in power, that was very clear. You had very strong public comments coming from administration officials talking about how it wanted to affirm that India is a major defense partner. There was a lot of talk about the important counterterrorism cooperation between the two countries, and things are moving forward, just as they have really over the last few decades. But it's really, I think, over the last few weeks when these economic tensions have really flared up. And, you know, let's be very clear that there have been economic tensions in this relationship in the past, pre-Trump. I'd actually argue that the economic side of the relationship is really the Achilles heel of the partnership, whereas the defense side, the defense relationship, is really the glue that really keeps this relationship together in a big way. But I think what we've seen recently, and perhaps with this latest postponement of the 2+2 summit, that the growing economic tensions are threatening to spill over onto the realm of defense and security. So to be sure, this relationship will survive, and I think we can all agree on that. There's plenty of goodwill, there's plenty of trust. There's already a bit of damage control at play, as I understand it, and of course, Nikki Haley, a very significant senior Trump administration official, has been in India, emphasizing that the relationship is important. So things will be okay, but I think that it's worrisome how bad things have become so relatively quickly over the last few weeks and months.
Yeah, but is that a Trump thing? Or is it an India-U.S. thing? Because Mr. Kugelman, you're talking about the economic relationship. India has announced retaliatory tariffs. They have to come into effect from first week of August. And perhaps this could have been an opportunity, among others, to smoothen things over. So is this something which is being seen with Trump and a lot of allies of the United States, and India just has to wait for it to blow over in whichever direction it does?
Well, I think it's hard to say. I think clearly Trump is trying to implement his America First policy, which has really never been very clearly defined. But clearly the idea there is to do whatever is possible to protect Americans, protect their jobs, protect their lives, et cetera. And I think these tariffs that clearly have been engineered by Trump, I think this is really him that's behind this new trade war. This is a case where, these domestic priorities in the U.S. are starting to collide with America's most important diplomatic relationships, such as the one with India. But again, I don't think we should overstate the tensions and the problems here. I think that the strength of the security partnership and the fact that you continue to have very clear convergent strategic interests between the two, particularly when it comes to issues like terrorism in South Asia, combating terrorism in South Asia, or concerns about China and its expanding presence and role in Asia, that will keep the relationship together. It will be able to overcome these economic problems. But I think that the major headline here is that one thing we could say about the Trump era is that even the most stable and the most sound relationships are susceptible to shocks, just because you have this president who is so unpredictable and does things so differently from how most previous American presidents have conducted diplomacy, for example. Yeah. It's just really hard to know what to expect.
But let's talk about another sticking point, which is really on the horizon right now, Ms. Deo, and that is Iran and India importing from Iran. Iran is, of course, the third largest supplier of fuel and of oil to India. Trump's not happy about it. India has said that we will do what suits us best, but there's been a news reporter on the wires just a few hours ago saying that oil importers have been asked to look at alternatives as well. Is this going to be a sticky situation, because India can't seem to capitulate either?
I agree entirely. I think that both the sanctions imposed on trade in oil with Iran, as well as the Indian intention to purchase a sophisticated missile defense system from Russia, which also might be jeopardized by new sanctions imposed on Russia, are in the mix. First of all, I'm not sure that despite the fact that President Trump is unpredictable and does tend to be his own spokesman, etc., that in the last few months he has been running his own policy towards India, apart from naming India whenever there is he is drawing up a list of countries that he wants to sanction on trade questions. But the Iran deal will have played into the administration, at least, because they are working so hard to isolate Iran, having walked out of a nuclear agreement, at precisely the agreement that the Europeans are now trying to salvage to the extent they can. There have been big protests in Iran. The Iranian currency is losing value by the day, and I would be surprised if the Americans weren't trying to push that agenda. At the same time, yes, I do agree that there is enough common interests in the India-U.S. relationship for it to survive several of these kinds of glitches. But nobody will say that it's in its best health at the moment.
Absolutely. Just a comment from you, Mr. Kugelman, on the situation with Iran. That is something that Nikki Haley chose to spoke about, even in the midst of all of the flowery language and all of the positive vibes. That is something the Trump administration really wants to enforce. And India's stated policy is that it recognizes only UN sanctions.
Well, yeah, I think that the U.S. and India may be on a collision course when it comes to the Iran issue, because I think it's very clear and very understandable that India will want to maintain its relationship with Iran, particularly its commercial relationship. As I recall, India was the third largest buyer of Iranian oil last year in 2017. And, given India's tremendous need for energy and particularly for hydrocarbons, it's not easy to just back out of that arrangement. And yet, yesterday, a State Department official essentially called on a number of countries, including India, to basically end all of their imports of oil from Iran by early November. And I simply do not see how or why India would want to do that. It would be very problematic for India's energy security, among other things. So, but it's true. I agree with the ambassador that the U.S. is not going to back down. It clearly is taking an extremely hard line on the Iran issue. The fact that you now have two new administration officials, Mike Pompeo and John Bolton, who are notorious for being Iran hawks and for not even necessarily ruling out the idea of using force in Iran. So given that, I don't think that the U.S. government will be in a mood to make exceptions in terms of trying to get countries not to do business with Iran. I think it should make an exception in the case of India, given how significant the relationship is between the Americans and the Indians. But I don't think that'll come easily for the United States. So as I said, this Iran issue could be a rising tension point between India and the United States.
Well, that's one to watch out for. Thank you so much for putting that in perspective, Neelam Deo and Michael Kugelman.
Sorry, I'm late.